Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Collective. Today, we are seeking to implement a new segment focused specifically on hosting guests from their own domain and expertise to aid us with tools and resources as we seek to maximize ourselves. Ethan Clay is a father of two who is currently serving in the U.S. Army in the 101st Airborne. He just so happens to be the gentleman who helped forge my desire personally to podcast and is one of my very good friends, a true brother born for adversity. Join us today on this episode as we seek to discuss fatherhood from his personal perspective and experience and what he recommends to young fathers and to the modern man. Ethan Clay.
Gary, how you doing, man?
I'm doing awesome, brother. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast. So, first question, jumping right into it. What does it mean to be a father in your experience and comprehension of it?
I think it means to be, being a father is being a provider, protector, but it's also being sacrificial. And that means that the needs of the family come before your own, and as well as your wants. And I have not been doing that well lately, to be honest. But yeah, we're called to be sacrificial, and I think that it's part of the process. Becoming a father is learning how to sacrifice, where to sacrifice, and like where to lay down my desires, my wants, for the sake of the wants and the needs of my family and specifically my children. So yeah, I would say that's what it means to be a father: sacrificial, provider, protector. But it has to be sacrificial, I think, in order for it to truly be fatherhood. Yeah.
It's interesting that, a little earlier we were talking and you defined it as a process of this gradual thing that, is a continual advancement in each moment that we have, in each day that we have with our children. And now hearing you come at it from this angle too is super critical, I think, just because it's not only the investment in yourself and your goals and ambitions, and I fall into the same pitfalls as well. So you're not alone in that. But realizing that it truly does come down to the bedrock of who we are as fathers, being giving of ourselves or using our energy that is of a nuclear caliber towards the building up and the advancement of people around us, beyond ourselves even. And so that's seen in the traditional norms of providing, protecting, and all the things that you listed. So I really like that frame of mind. I think it's a beautiful frame of mind because it sets us at the tone of what we're supposed to be, and it keeps it reminding us, and it keeps us humble because it's a standard. It's a nice guide rail for us to measure ourselves. Not recognizing it doesn't change our identity as father or as dad, but it does call us to strive for excellence in that calling and purpose.
We can always be sacrificing more. There's like no question about it. We can always be sacrificing more.
Yeah, man. I mean, do you put the cookies all the way at the top? I mean, if you feed your kid cookies, I mean that's a different conversation. But you put your cookies at the top of it where they can't reach them, or do you you guide them to reach in it and ascertain to what they can become?
Yeah.
That's a awesome way to start this conversation, I think. And so with that, then, transitioning into it, because I recognize that all expressions and definitions have a foundation and a framework from which they derive. What was your personal experience with your father? And obviously, feel free to go in as much detail as you want, withhold what you want, that's on you. But I like to see the foundations of how people understood fatherhood from their experience with their dad.
Yeah. My dad was very strong, strong-willed, And so his way was always the highway. And I just learned to, in a sense, to say yes, sir, no, sir, to everything. Um, but I also think that even going back beyond him, he didn't have a dad around really. My grandfather wasn't really around for my dad growing up, and so my dad he didn't have guidance. He didn't have an example set before him to know what does it look like to be a man and what does it look like to be a father. So he was figuring it out himself, and I think he did. I think as all parents do, well, the best of his ability. We're all living life for the first time. I even look at my dad right now. He's in his 50s, but he's 50, 4 or whatever it is for the first time. He's experiencing life at that age for the first time, and so just now, hindsight being 2020, looking back, um, he was figuring it out, and he did the best that he could. So I can't hold anything to him for that reason. Just like for myself, I'm now learning everything. So for the first time, but yeah, he was strong willed, protector, provider. I always felt taken care of with him. I always felt like I was safe. I always knew that he had my best interest in mind, and that um, it almost freed me to kind of push the limits a little bit. I think knowing that you have somebody who is always going to be setting those guardrails, who is always going to be giving you your left and right limitations, almost gives you that freedom within that discipline to kind of push the limits a little bit, knowing that he would always pull me back. He was always going to pull me back, whether that was physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever the case is. He was never going to let me go too far. And an example of that would be, and obviously some of this is also just um, innocence and ignorance as a young child, especially. But
Yeah.
an example of that would just be, um, feeling his protection, feeling his safety in the sense of we were out fishing one year in Colorado, and I don't remember how old I was, somewhere around 10-ish, maybe a little bit younger. And he was wearing flip flops in the river. We were fishing in the river, standing in the river, and his flip flop comes off, and I'm a little bit further downstream from him, but not by much, just in about arm's reach from him. And so his flip flop comes to the surface and starts coming down towards me, and I see it, and I start, kind of wading out to kind of go and get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm getting into deeper and faster and stronger
Mm-hmm.
current, thinking that I'm going to help my dad by grabbing this flip flop. And I just remember, like, kind of like slow motion, almost feeling in a sense, going to kind of dive for this flip flop. And as I'm doing that, my dad grabs my other arm and just pulls me back, and just goes, no, like, you could have gotten taken all the way down the river, et cetera, worst case
Mm-hmm.
scenario type stuff. But I think that is in part, that's being a child. I think in part that is being a child, but it is because of scenarios like that, that I felt his presence, and I knew that I was always going to be safe, and I knew I was going to be taken care of. I never felt um, not abandoned per se, but just I never felt like he wasn't watching me. He wasn't
Yeah.
trying to take care of me. So yeah, that's just an example of his being a protector, and I think I've tried to
Mm-hmm.
take that on myself as well, being a new father as well. He was. I mean, in now more so looking at maybe some of his pitfalls, he was not super emotionally available.
Gotcha.
And ironically, ding, 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 here I am not being super emotionally available to my family, to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so obviously, we have the generational kind of sin, I think, to some degree, to some effect, that kind of carries down, but I'm aware of it at a very young and early age. And so I think I am going to be working against that to the best of my ability, moving forward over the next couple of years, um, to not be the dad like my dad was, who can't be talked to, who can't, whose kids can't share what they're feeling, with him, who can't share even the littlest things with them because they already know
Mm,
kind of what the answer is going to be. They
right.
already know that they're kind of just going to get a stern talking to, or that's ridiculous, or whatever. So
Mm,
I've found that that was how he was, not super emotionally available and not super understanding or gracious all the time. And that led me to not really feel open with him. And so
yeah.
I'm hoping that for myself, as I grow as being a father and being a husband, that I can um, continue to work on improving in those areas because I can already see that those are pitfalls for myself. Probably because that's what was modeled for me, but I want to break that cycle for my kids. So yeah, I would say my dad was, like I said, he was strong, protector, provider, strong-willed, his way or the highway. But with that, on the backside came, um, you know, the inability to feel understood or heard by him. So that would be the pitfall is, and there's always two sides to the coin, and we always operate generally I think we tend to operate in extremes.
Mm,
And so it's our job to be continually finding the balance. I don't think he ever really found the balance with that. I think he was totally fine with just being strong and his way being the highway and us
yeah.
just falling in line with that. So
Yep.
yeah, that was who he was. But I appreciate it. I appreciate um, the way that he raised me. It made me, um, I'm proud and I'm thankful that I was his son. So I would say I'm thankful
Mm,
for it in hindsight, but as a child, especially as a kid, and it's hard. It's hard to not feel understood. It's hard to not feel heard. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, it's always so interesting to hear the dynamic of people's lives with their dad, and I've known my own father's experience with his dad, and hearing yours is super unique. So all of that with the caveat of thank you for being willing to share,
for sure.
because I know it's personal, and I know it's obviously the experience with which you went through, but again, in the same way that my dad was able to take the reality, but also have the realness kind of married with a realistic optimism, if you will, where you're able to kind of see both the strengths and the weaknesses of your father's as a man in his greatest moments and in his weakest moments, and kind of see how can I measure out a balanced perspective moving forward, recognizing either the tendencies in him and therefore the tendencies in myself, or how do I go about being the things that he was in all the good ways, and also potentially avoiding the things that he wasn't. Um, and I think it's always super interesting too, because I think a lot of people our age, when it comes to fatherhood specific, and this isn't speaking as an expert, just kind of assessing conversations that I've had with other people and yourself. Now, the idea of the my way or the highway kind of mentality that our
Yep.
fathers tend to have, recognizing the strength and the stability in them, and yet the difficulty with the I think Chris Williams said it on his podcast on one of the episodes recently, where he's like, the N word of 2024 is nuance, and
Yeah,
just recognizing that each given situation and each person has a different dynamic to them, and trying to be open to maximizing our own children's potential is something that has really been at the bedrock of the perspective I'm trying to have. You know, pulling out of them the full measure of who they are and what that demands and requires of me, not only wanting to, in a sense, set them up for success, but also meet them where they're at,
mm,
um, and being willing to listen, being willing to understand, and being willing to pull them out of the waters when I need
yeah,
to use your dad's example.
yeah,
So, again, I really appreciate you sharing that, man, because I know it's truth and I know it's honest. Um, and I know that in processing those things, we learn so much about our own fathers and ourselves. And so I'm hoping that was just as much useful for you, as far as vocalizing things like that.
100%. Yeah.
um, as it is for myself and the potential audience that'll hear it, because we're going to be able to glean from things like that. And so you get this trickling down from the definition of what is a father to your experience with your own dad, and now being able to ask you so far, what is your personal experience as a father?
Um, yeah, I mean, it is, it's probably fairly similar to what my father experienced in terms of, well, I mean, it's what I said, before. It's the first time. I'm 26, 27 for the first time, and I am a
Mm,
father of two for the first time. And so um, I hope that uh, maybe I have a better sense of self awareness um,
mm,
than he did, because I also think that should be a goal for us as parents. We should never be looking at our kids and wishing that they would do things exactly the way we did, or that they would
mm,
be less than us. We should always be hoping that our kids are going to do better, that our kids are going to be better, that they're going to, like, their potential is far above ours. Is that should be our hope, and we should hope that they do. So I feel confident that um, my dad would hopefully agree, or if not agree, that he would root for me to have more self awareness than he did at this age. Um,
mm,
and so my experience is being aware of my pitfalls and being aware of my shortcomings, and not always necessarily knowing how to fix them immediately,
mm,
and finding myself, you know, looking at my lack of being self sacrificial, and looking at myself lacking in understanding, lacking compassion, and being like, man, like in the moment, um, you know, like, you got to fix this, you know what I mean? And
yep.
just not always knowing how, and then hoping, moving forward, always thinking and assessing, like, okay, now moving forward, how can I do better next time? And then if I don't, it's just another example to add to the filing cabinet of, well, that's what we're not going to do. And,
Mm,
remember this. And I mean, yeah, remember it. And so in hopes that, that feeling of, in in my mind, that feeling of failure, that feeling of not doing and executing things the way that I should, of loving the way that I should, of understanding the way that I should, hopefully that feeling starts to, the more times that I fall short, the more times that it's not happening, and I
mm,
and I know that it needs to be improved upon. I'm hoping that that feeling starts to weigh and starts to become a realization of, like, okay, dude, like, it's 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Okay, what, like, are we gonna actually work to make a change, or are we just gonna
right.
continue this cycle that's gonna become rigorous, and we don't want that. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, on a positive side, I mean, it's just been wonderful, and it completely changes your motivation in life.
Yeah, it does.
It literally gives you a whole new fire that,
Mm,
I love my wife, but just being a dad, especially being a dad of girls, like, I don't know, it gives you a fire in your belly to provide in a way that didn't exist before. And um, talk about being willing to run through walls and stuff like that. You always hear these cliches, these adages that you're like, oh yeah, I'm sure that's how you feel, but it's like, no.
dude.
Like, when you get there, you're like, oh, I will literally do, like, whatever it takes, and and
Yeah.
so within reason, I guess, more so within, like, legality to a certain degree. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, I would I would do anything for my kid. Yeah, I
Mm,
think even outside of, what is quote unquote right or wrong, however you want to put that. Nobody's gonna touch my kids. You know what I mean? Like that type
mm,
of mentality. So anyway, it gives you a fire. It gives you a fire. And it's humbling. I mean, yeah, coming back to the self-sacrificial portion, it's humbling. Again, when you get married, you you experience this reality of, oh, I thought I was this great person. I thought I was, so humble and so
Right.
selfless, and I'm so good at loving people. And then you
Yep.
get this other person that comes and lives with you, and now you realize, how prideful you are and how
Mhm.
selfish you are, and
Mm.
all the ways I need to like grow and improve, and all the ways that I'm not this great
Mm.
person. Kids only multiply that, and I think every kid that you have, it just multiplies it a little bit more.
Yep.
So yeah, having two daughters now, and just realizing how impatient I am, how selfish I am, how much I need to grow in these things. But at the end of the day, like, they are beautiful and they're everything to me. Well, yeah, just it's. I think my experience being a dad has been a humbling one. It's been a revelatory one, and it's been one that's actually allowed me to grow and do things that if I wasn't a father, I probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't have this passion, this desire, this fire, like I said, to just go and pursue um, excellence in the workplace, excellence in other areas of my life that
Right.
I really ultimately, in the back of my mind, like, I'm doing it because they exist.
Mm.
Because if it was just me left up to myself, I don't really think I pursue those things the same way.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so yeah, I would say that's been my experience. Is just it's humbling, realizing all the ways that I still need to improve. And it's also wonderful and beautiful to have these little human beings that just look up to you and depend on you, and you get to take care of them and spend time with them. And it's amazing. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I deeply resonate with a lot of the things that you said, from, just cherishing each moment that you have with them to the moments that you realize, oh, I'm not patient. Man, I thought I was pretty long suffering and I was slow to anger and all these other things. And it's like, dude, why aren't you sleeping?
Yeah.
In the middle of the night or things of that nature. And yeah, I think a lot of it turns into reframing. I like what Alex Ramosi says about patience. He's like, we tend to like think of patience as this huge moral virtue and characteristic of these people who are pursuing just upper echelon types of ethics and stuff like that. He's like,
Mm.
but if you reframe it, it's just finding something else to do in the meantime, and just the little simplicity of something like that, learning to reframe in the difficult moments, so that way you're not automatically assuming what you're labeling yourself with because of your insufficiency.
Yeah.
Um, and yet having the wherewithal to recognize, just like you were saying, when you do fail in those moments, being like, hey, man, you're on level 10 right now and you got a bigger boss to face. And if you don't beat the boss, you haven't learned.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
semblance that you've accomplished the thing. Um, and that is literally what life is going to throw at you. And I think it's like, if parenting wasn't worth it, it wouldn't be hard. And the fact that it is hard in those like moments, and I mean the real moments, that therein lies the fact that it is worth it, because it's requiring the full measure of yourself, just like you're saying, the full measure of yourself for the investment of the full measure of them.
Well,
Um,
and how often do people just not like, they sell like the role of parenting short because they just don't think it's important. But yet, like you
yeah,
just said, if much is required of you in order to do something, then it's obviously it carries a weight. There is an importance there. So yeah, I think that's silly when people don't understand the importance of that role.
yeah,
And it's perpetuating in our culture of just like individuality.
yeah,
Individualism is more important than the whole, when it comes to being a part of a greater self becomes more important than the group. So anyway, sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
no, 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 not at all. I think it's a great point because I think it points to the fact that, just like Uncle Ben says, great power comes great responsibility. And that's something I was thinking about this week, was the idea of like, in responsibility is, or excuse me, in the freedom to pursue what you want to be or desire to propagate in your life is the call of responsibility. And responsibility, like true responsibility, taking on the gauntlet of what's demanded of you, therein lies the liberty.
Yeah.
Right? That's the true framework to pursue those things properly, because it allows us to be like, oh, this is really like what is required of me, you know, to give of myself for the sake of others. That is what it means to take on the responsibility of parenthood,
Yeah.
not just responsibility is associated with parenthood. It's like, no, within the framework of parenthood, therein lies responsibility. And once you accept that,
Yeah.
then you have the lens put on in a sense of like, okay, so that means this of me and this of me and this of me, and you learn that over time, just like we're saying about the gradual process
Yeah.
of becoming a father and learning what it means to be a father. Man, that's a yeah, dude. You keep just giving beautiful frameworks, and I just love the small things that you're saying. Even the idea of this being your first time, you know, as a 26, 27-year old, and I really appreciate that perspective because that allows and lends to so much opportunity for people to have an understanding in their situation, and yet a desire to be better,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it gives their space and room for some grace, but it also is like, well, right on, you know, walking in faith is also walking into an unknown.
Yeah.
And so actually having the wherewithal to be like, I got to step forward even though I don't know what's going to happen. And that requires courage.
Yeah.
So that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's one, if I could pen down from each episode little points and stuff like that, that's definitely one I would do from this one.
Right on. Right on. That's awesome. Do you mind if I enjoy my tobacco pipe while we're
I
doing
do
this?
not, sir.
All right. Right on.
It is a
Sorry.
semblance of traditional masculinity. So
Right on.
have
Right
at
on.
it. No, it's totally fine. Um, Transitioning from that thought, then, um, as you're lighting your pipe and setting the ambiance for yourself, uh, I want to ask you something to pass along from your definition of fatherhood
Yeah.
to your experience with your dad and now your own experience. What's one key principle of fatherhood that you would pass on to someone if they were to ask you, like, hey man, I'm a new dad, I really want to do this right, and I really want to be about what I'm supposed to be about as a father? How would you go about, passing on some wisdom to them in that light?
Go about passing on wisdom to like give them a solid like kind of first piece of advice becoming a father for the first time.
Yeah, so this question is definitely one key principle of fatherhood specifically.
Yeah, I mean, uh, I think that a key principle of fatherhood, I mean, it's going to start with manhood, I think. Um, but okay, so I mean, if there is a person who became a father maybe before it was their time, in a sense, you know what I mean, like kind of prematurely, they haven't really become a man yet, and yet, or they haven't. Sorry, I should rephrase that. If they haven't begun to take the steps in growing in their manhood, I think that's a better way to phrase it, because I
Mhm.
don't believe we ever arrive. You never are like,
Sure.
you're now a man. It's like, no, you're always becoming more of a man than
Mm,
you were before.
mm,
So if somebody feels like they're a bit premature in that process, where it's like, I barely feel like I've even started taking steps towards, my manhood and maturing in that way, and yet they find themselves being a father. Um, Kind of like we said earlier, I think naturally it should, if you have the right mentality, it should be sparking a fire in you to be taking care of this new life that's being brought into the world. And so therefore I would just say, put them above everybody and everything else. That self-sacrificial framework and mentality, I think, is the key point, because um, there's just going to be things that we're not going to want to do.
Mm.
that we have to do,
Mm.
and there's no option, there's no excuse um, to not be doing it. Like you said, with great power comes great responsibility. That's a responsibility. It now is to be self-sacrificing, to put this individual's wants and needs above your own. And again, that is a very idealistic way of speaking about it, because um, in every moment we fail to do that. I think we can both agree. Like, there are
Mm.
just times where we just put ourselves above our priorities over the priorities of people around us, and that's just, that's a part of being human.
Yeah.
But I think when you can feel it in your spirit, when you can feel it in your heart, that like that tension of, I know that I should be doing this for my son or my daughter, but I'm
Mm.
gonna do this instead. Even something as simple as like going outside with them, or like
Yeah.
reading a book with them, or even for more of a newborn stage, holding them when they're crying but you're really tired, and you just kind of feel like just letting them cry it out. And obviously, again, we're talking about ideals here.
Sure.
There are just those times where you are just, as being a human ourselves, like, we're just tired, and
Yeah.
so there's room for grace in that. But yeah, I think that'd be my piece of wisdom, would just be work on being self-sacrificing and outward focused towards your family,
Mm.
towards your kids. But um, yeah, I think that even before you get to that point, it's really important to be developed and be mentally working towards taking steps in your journey as a man,
Yeah.
to be protector, to be provider, to have your own kind of ducks in a row. And we can talk about that later. We love talking about that stuff. But
Oh yeah.
yeah. So anyway, that'd be my piece of advice.
No, man. That's I think that's really key, and especially in today's modern context, because a lot of people have an issue with not only defining what masculinity is right now, but also the idea of being grounded in that in themselves and being your own man in a very real way. And I don't mean in the sense of, being an alpha male and just pushing everybody aside and doing whatever the heck you want, but the sense of, you know who you are, you know what your purpose is, and you know where you're headed. And you're
Yeah.
having a good time while you're doing that,
Yeah.
on your way there.
Yeah.
Um, and having I think the key word is resolve that keeps coming to my mind. Having the resolve within yourself. So I think that's super crucial, because until you have fatherhood, or excuse me, manhood, you can't really enter into fatherhood in the same dynamic and way. Um, Not just because those two words have hood in them, but if you can understand what I'm saying with that, you know, cultivation of self leads to the cultivation of how you're going to treat others.
Yeah, for sure. And like, being able to be resilient in your own life will carry into being resilient in the lives of others. So if you
Mm.
haven't built up some of those basic building blocks, like you're saying, in yourself first, then how are you gonna be able to do it for the people around you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, and I think, maybe this is, I don't want to break off too much on a tangent, but maybe this is the we had the college experience where we lived with like seven other dudes every 3 months and cycled through that over and over. And I think that's only a taste of what you get, because, well, some of them act like infants, and sometimes you
Yeah.
act like an infant, but
Yeah.
you get a real insider scoop on where people are at and how you truly interact with them when your parents aren't around, when your friends and your community's not around, and different things like that as we were cultivating ourselves into adults. I think maybe the question then is, as you're developing into a man, what are some key ways to make yourself resilient?
Yeah. I mean, I have not a unique experience, because there are obviously plenty of people that have joined the military, plenty of people that have been in the infantry. So I'm not saying it's unique in that sense, but in the sense of like, your everyday, your day to day life, going through basic training, different things like that. You can't necessarily just get that just out in the regular world, out in the
Yeah.
civilian world. So um, I don't necessarily probably have a great answer in the sense of, well, how do you create resiliency for yourself in a normalized setting, or in a normal, like, general everyday life setting.
Sure.
um, there is nothing like being forced to do things that you don't want to do,
Mm.
and having to do them anyway. Like, there's no other, like, way of building resilience outside of that, like, where it's like literally, legally, I am obligated to do whatever this person says,
Mm.
basically being enslaved. And that builds a level of resiliency that just, doing hard things in your everyday life just doesn't necessarily do, because you're still having the free will, that you're having the volition in yourself to choose to go on that, 10-mile run, or go and, do a CrossFit workout, or go and whatever the challenging thing is. It doesn't have to be necessarily physical. It can be
Mhm.
mental. But when you're choosing to do it on your own, yeah, you're creating resiliency in yourself, undoubtedly. Yeah, yes, you're doing that. But um it's just different when you're, in a sense, you're kind of being held at gunpoint,
Yeah.
like, in terms of legally, like,
Yep.
you don't have another option. So,
Mm.
do hard things. Like, that's something that everybody talks about nowadays, right? Like, that's on all of the mainstream dudes that are out there talking about what it means to be a man.
Yep.
It's do hard things. So I
Yep.
think it's a message that's you know been chirped and preached a lot over the last 5-10 years or so now. um but I mean, yeah, I mean, that's it. I think, if unless you are going to do something like put yourself through the hell of signing your life away to the higher powers that be, then, which I personally wouldn't recommend. That's just me. But
Sure. Sure.
I say keep your autonomy. But yeah, find find other people then, that outside of yourself, but what within your friend circle, that can keep you accountable to it, because now you're
Mm.
not being held at gunpoint legally. It's not a legally binding contract, but you
Yep.
have another person there that's going to be pushing you to do the hard things.
Yep.
And in a sense, especially for us as men, I think there's some level of pride that's not going to let you quit, and so you do feel a bit more um, of a sense of duty or requirement to accomplish whatever you guys set out to do. So, if you and I are like, all right, we're going to go run a marathon in like 2 months, and one of us, doesn't show up, like,
Yeah.
okay, well, what's the deal? But then when we do get there and we feel like quitting,
Mm.
we feel obligated now for the other person to finish it out, not just for ourselves, but for the other person to finish, that 24 miles out.
Yeah.
And so that's going to build some resiliency, it kind of in a similar fashion, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say find people around you, find people near you that you can do hard things with. I think that's again an answer that's probably been said a lot, but I think that is a good answer.
Mm.
So and
N- Yeah, man. No, I think that's very pointed, and I think it's direct, but it gives directives, and it's very straightforward to, I think, what's missing in a lot of us. Because, I have very much tried to integrate things into my life to invoke that same standard in myself, recognizing that I haven't gone through basic training, recognizing that I haven't gone through the throes of what the military could throw at you, and yet I think it is fortitude and having a resolve, because you're bound to a standard, regardless of whether you're legally having to do it because, well, whether you want to or not, you got to do it. But at the same time, like you're saying, surrounding yourself with community and accountability to make sure that you are setting the standard.
yeah,
Um, that's good. I really appreciated that last time you were in town. We got to do a workout together, because to me, like, stuff like that is so much more formative, not just physically speaking, but so much more formative as friends and as brothers, to push each other and to just let that be just a general part of our lives, because even though it was a physical way of exerting ourselves, it was pushing towards developing resiliency and pushing each other towards that end. And so I appreciate things like that, and I'm trying to learn the comfortability with uncomfortability, as it's often quoted.
Yeah. And you killed me, by the way, in that workout session we had. Was
Hey, man.
That was a burner, and I think I felt that for at least a week. So yeah, I mean,
Nice.
and that was an example of like, you were there, so I wasn't gonna just walk out of the gym after our first couple of sets. So
All I
it
know
was good.
is that you lifted more than me, and I did not do as many sets. So,
No, it was good, man. That's what's it was freaking good. That's what it's all about. Just getting after it together,
heck
regardless
yeah,
of what the numbers look like. You know what I mean?
hundred
It was
percent.
still good. And again, it was your idea, so you're the one technically that crushed me in that sense. So yeah,
Hey, this is a formal invitation to you and to anybody who is a dad or just a dude out there trying to get after it. If you're in town or you want to hit me up for a workout or something like that, let me know, man. Let's just keep pushing each other to that. So, anyways, that's our
heck
ad for
yeah.
this podcast. We're gonna transition back to the conversation.
Work out with the
Uh,
Richardson Collective.
go, be, do. So that's awesome, man. Well, I think that's key um to fatherhood is resiliency in all the subtle ways that you mentioned as well. The crying infant to putting up with the moments where you're frustrated and you don't know why you're frustrated to the moments of annoyance where it's like I don't really want to change that diaper right now, or I don't really want
Yeah,
to deal with the way that my spouse and I feel like we're passing off this kid to each other, when it's like, oh yeah, we're supposed to be loving them, right?
yeah,
And having difficulty. But with that said, since you've given one key principle of fatherhood, I want to transition it and make it a little more open. It can be the same answer, and this will be the last question for us. But what is one token of life advice that you would give to young men, current men, and future fathers, other than learning how to smoke a pipe?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was actually pressed. This was pressed on me by some other people. I didn't even pick this up until about the last year or so. But um, one piece of life advice. Um, yeah, I would just say, and again, this is gonna just be, I feel like, some kind of regurgitated, but it's at the end of the day, it's just
Really cool.
realize that we never, you never arrive. Um, and
Mm,
I know people have said that before. It's definitely, it's not an original thought by any means, but um, whether that be in your pursuit of becoming a man, being a better husband, being a better father, whatever the case is, just being a better person in general. Once, and honestly, too, I think the biggest one is in your relationship with God. Um, once you feel like you've arrived, uh, you're wrong and you're in a
mm,
very dangerous place. And so I think it's a really good idea to, I don't think it's a really good idea. I know that it is a good practice to be telling yourself how you're not there yet. You haven't arrived. And just struggling with that balance of pursuing excellence on the one hand and understanding that you'll always fall short of it, and so therefore the pursuit just doesn't end. Um, that would be it, man. Is just don't ever think that you've arrived in any facet of your life, because we never will. Not until we see Christ. We won't arrive.
mm.
So yeah, I think that'd be it.
Right on, man. Well, that that lends to one last thought that I have on that, and that's when I was leading the middle school life group at our youth group for a bit, I kind of developed these rules, and they were just two-word phrases that these kids could kind of grapple with and start wrestling with the concepts. A lot of what we're talking about, and the first one was just be real. Be real with God because He knows where you're at. Be real with yourself because if you're not real with yourself, you're not willing to tell the truth, you can't grow as a person and you can't grow with others, which is the last part, is be real with others. And so just that self authenticity and being willing to actually be bold enough to tell the truth, I think is the the final little add-on cherry on the top of what you're saying with that.
Yeah.
So, no, that's all good, man. I really appreciate you, Ethan, as a friend, as a brother.
Appreciate you, man. I appreciate you too.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
this was good. This was really good. Like you said earlier, this was really good for me as well, just to get to think through and process some of these things. Um, I haven't really gotten to talk about this type of stuff very often with people, especially in the last, I mean, pretty much since COVID, honestly. These types
mm,
of conversations have been few far and in between. So I think this is a great opportunity to be able to do this. And I hope that it serves a greater purpose as well, outside of just us developing. But if at baseline, if nothing else, it definitely was good for me. So I appreciate you letting me come on and just chat with you, and I appreciate you asking questions, man. I think it's great. So yeah,
heck yeah, man. Well, like I said, it was definitely an honor to have you on. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your diligence with all the behind the scenes stuff that we've been talking about too, and getting this conversation underway. Um, it
trying,
means
man.
it means a
Yeah,
ton. So,
yeah,
like you said, I hope this was, not only useful for you and for myself, but for you guys who are the listeners, and anybody else who's, looking to develop and cultivate themselves and be not only better for them, but for the people that are to come. And so,
and
with that,
and be a better pipe smoker as well.
oh man, a little backy action in there.
Yeah, just kidding, just
That's
kidding.
awesome, man.
You don't have to be.
Well, it's definitely welcome in this community, so no pressure whatsoever. But with that, man, I look forward to talking with you, just chatting in general, and pushing each other in the ways that we talked about here.
Yeah,
And go be an awesome dad, dude.
thanks, man. You too. Yeah, thanks for having me on, brother.
Heck yeah.
All right,
Thanks, man.
peace.
Peace.